Okay, hello everybody and welcome to the KIDLIT Distancing Social. I am Laura Backus, the publisher of the Children's Book Insider newsletter and also co-creator of Writing Blueprints, along with my husband, John Bard. And if you are new to the social, welcome. And if you are a regular socialite, thank you for joining us tonight. I see a lot of regulars in the chat box, which we always love to see every week. And we have a really great topic for you tonight. And I'm excited that you're all here. So again, if you're new to us and you want to get on our list to hear about all of our KIDLIT distancing socials every week, as well as everything else we're doing, you can go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, and you will get on our list. And you also get a free ebook, which gathers up 30 years of knowledge on the basics of writing for kids into a free ebook. We are celebrating our 30th year in business this year with our newsletter, Children's Book Insider. So go ahead and sign up for that, and you will be notified of everything we do. And if you're not a subscriber to Children's Book Insider and you would like to be, we have a special offer for our socialites. writeforkids.org/CBI, just $5 a month. You'll get about 20 pages a month of information, articles, interviews, also market information from what publishers and agents are looking for. Thank you, Sharon. Happy 30th. Thank you very much. We also have special, what are called above the slush pile codes with either an editor or an agent every month, where you get to, CBI subscribers get to submit for a period of time to our featured spotlight interviewee and use a special code to jump over the slush pile and have your work looked at. And very often these are submission opportunities that are closed to unsolicited manuscripts. So that's a great deal. So that's how you can subscribe. So we do a feature every week, Where in the World? Often it's Where in the World is Laura, where I try to have you guess where I am, some literary landmark. But I also have you guys send me pictures, which we have today. Where in the world are you? So where in the world is Pat Traddles? So Pat is somewhere very beautiful. Look at that lovely display made out of flowers and greenery, the wonderful Wizard of Oz. So tell me in the chat box, and by the way, the chat box is set to all panelists. I can see your answers, nobody else can. We've had to do that just because. I can see your answers. So see if you can guess where this lovely, lovely place is. So Sharon guessed Kansas. No. I am just looking at my notes here to make sure I remember what state this is. Oh, there it is. Okay. Not Kansas. Nope. Not Illinois. Not England. It is in the United States. Wisconsin? No, you're kind of in the general area, you know, right? Sort of region of the country. I'll let you guess a couple more minutes and then or a couple more guesses. Not Massachusetts, more toward the Midwest. I will give you a clue. The town is called Holland. I don't know if that helps y'all. All right, let's see. Where is Beth got it. Michigan, Holland, Michigan. So this is the Herrick District Library and Centennial Park in Holland, Michigan. And the author, L. Frank Baum, who wrote Wizard of Oz, spent summers vacationing at Makatawa think that's how you say it, park on the shores of Lake Michigan in Holland, Michigan. So, and this is the area that inspired him to create his classic story. So they, in the Centennial Park and leading right up to the library, they created this wonderful exhibit that includes bronze sculptures, a living floral mosaic. We saw the book there, the yellow brick road, all in honor of the Wizard of Oz. And this brick road leads to the library. So isn't that awesome? I just think that is so cool. So thank you, Pat, for sending that in. So I'd like to hear more from you guys and see where you are. So go ahead and take a picture of any literary landmark that you happen to be visiting or any place that inspires your writing. You can be in the picture if you'd like, and you can email it to me with a brief description of where you are and permission to use the photos, and send it as a JPEG and email it to me to mail@writeforkids.org and put where in the world in the subject line. I would love to see where you are. I get to travel vicariously through you. So now we get to celebrate the successes of all of our subscribers and customers and socialites. So Lee Lyon announced that Tilbury House Publishers is re-releasing the book Playing War, which she had originally illustrated in 2005, and she got to do a new cover, and the book has a different ending, so there's some new illustrations on the inside, and she got to update some interior images. And the story is about two boys, one who was in a real war, who decide that friendship is more important than playing war. And the book's rebirth day is in early November. So congratulations, Lee. It's wonderful when books get new life like that, especially if they let you kind of freshen them up and give them a little facelift. So congrats and happy rebirth day to your book. And we have something to celebrate. So next Tuesday, we are having a paid webinar called The Lowdown. A top editor reveals the 10 things that get KIDLIT manuscripts rejected and how to avoid them forever. And this is presented by Deborah Halverson, who is an amazing editor and writer. And she has the Dear Editor blog, which is very, very popular. And she's an incredible teacher. And so she is going to give you a deep dive into these 10 mistakes, and they are not the obvious things that you hear from over and over, like at writing conferences and stuff. She's really going deep with this. And it's across the board, picture books through YA. And so if you want to sign up for that, writeforkids.org/10-things is the link. It will be $47 to attend live. And if you can't attend live, there will be a recording. You will have access to it for life. After the live event, you can still purchase the webinar, but it will be $67. So if you want to save 20 bucks, sign up for the live event. And like I said, you will have access to the recording, even if you can't attend live. And there is a hefty PDF handout that goes with it as well. Okay. I want to hear your good news. Anything that you want to celebrate, mail at writeforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line. And normally I have at least 2 or 3 celebrations. This week I only had 1, which tells me you are not getting into the spirit of the celebrate here. So after you hear Teresa talk tonight, you're going to have more things that you can do, that you can celebrate to advance your career as a writer. And I want to hear about them. So between now and next Thursday, I expect you to send me some celebrate news. That's my lecture for the day. Okay, let's take a poll. We have a poll today that I think is going to apply to what Teresa's going to talk about tonight. Right now, how do you feel like a writer? And here are your choices, and you can vote. Not so much, I'm stalled, still managing to write in bits and pieces. I've carved out a regular slot of time and I'm sticking to it most days. Absolutely, the ideas are flowing. Or I haven't been able to write much, but I'm able to do other things to advance my career. Maybe you're following some blogs that are writing related, or you're starting to make a list of possible agents you can submit to once your manuscript's done, or you're reading a bunch of new books. Anything like that counts. And by the way, those are the things we can celebrate with you. But we want to hear kind of where you are, how you're doing. How's your mojo right now as a writer? And I'll give you just a couple more, about 10 more seconds to vote. We want to give everybody a shot here. I know there's a lot of stuff we're thinking about, a lot of stuff we're trying to do right now. So writing may feel like it's not as easy as you'd like it to be, and that's completely normal. Okay, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The polls are closed. See, I'm giving you a little practice for voting here. And share results. Still managing to write in bits and pieces is the runaway winner there. Okay, well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that. I'm sure Teresa is too. And maybe she's got some more advice for you on how to keep that going. Maybe even do more than bits and pieces. So that's good. I was worried that we were going to get a lot of stalled. So, and if you are stalled, it's okay. Like I said, it's very, very understandable right now. Okay. Oh, Beth says her internet connection is unstable. Sorry about that, Beth. Hope you can stick with us through the whole social. Okay, here's a few links of interest that I have gathered for you this week. A couple really interesting blog posts. So this one, 4 Ways to Bring Out Theme in Your Story by C.S. Lakin on the livewritethrive.com website, gives great tips on how to incorporate theme into your plot by asking yourself some really important questions, such as, why am I passionate about this plot I've come up with? What issues speak to my heart or upset me? What kinds of conflicts in values, morals, beliefs, and ideas can my characters have that will enhance my premise? These are really great questions to be asking of yourself and of your characters to enhance theme. So I gave you a direct link to this particular post, which is very detailed, bit.ly/bring-out-theme. It's definitely worth reading. Another one, writers often ask me a question I can't answer, by Mathina. Whoops, sorry about that. Yeah, okay. I hit something. Mathina Calliope for Jane Friedman's blog explains how a writing coach answers the question, am I a good enough writer to keep doing this? Which I'm sure you've all asked yourself at some point. So you can read that at bit.ly, am I a good writer? I know it looks really weird in the link. I just tried good writer, but that link was already taken. So bit.ly/am I a good writer? It's a really interesting answer, how she kind of deals with this question, and I think it's worth reading. Okay, now I get to bring on my guest. So Teresa Funke embodies the modern artist and entrepreneur. She's the owner of Teresa Funke and Company, Victory House Press, and Bursts of Brilliance. She is the award-winning author of 7 novels for adults and children based on true stories from World War II, and the author of Bursts of Brilliance for a Creative Life, which is both a book and a blog. She's also a nationwide speaker offering keynotes and presentations and is a popular writing consultant. So she's very smart. She's also the instructor for several of our Writing Blueprints products, including our self-publishing blueprint. And so as you can see, she has expertise in a lot of different areas of writing, as well as setting yourself up to be a professional author. So I'm very happy to welcome our friend Teresa on tonight to discuss some steps you can be taking right now, even during these difficult times, to help pave the way for a successful writing career. Hello, Teresa. You can come on now. There you are. Hey.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, welcome. Glad to have you here tonight. So let's start chatting here. You did this great webinar for us, the 10 things all successful authors do. And so you know what it takes to be a successful writer, and some really important steps that basically, if people want to set themselves up to be a success or to be a career author, there's certain things they need to do. But it's hard to do a lot of that stuff right now, you know.
It's, yes.
Yeah. So what advice do you have for, first of all, let's talk about what some of these things might be and how we might be able to take those steps now when we often can't leave the house, get to the library, get together with other writers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. So a couple of years ago when we did the product, the 10 things all successful writers do, I mean, we dug in deep to talk about not just how do you get started, but how do you maintain that career as a writer? How do you keep going and produce numerous books like I've been doing if your goal and your hope is to be a career writer? Some people just want to write one book. They have one book they know that they want to do, and that's perfectly great and acceptable too. A lot of these points apply, but other people have a dream of being a writer. And what does that mean? And what does that look like? And so I'm especially excited to talk about this topic tonight because just a couple of days ago on October 6th, I celebrated my 29th anniversary as a professional writer.
Awesome.
And just taking the time this week to reflect on, oh my gosh, 29 years I've been doing this. I've been sort of living the dream, the ups and downs and on everything that go along with it for 29 years. And that's kind of amazing to me. And, I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was in the 5th grade. And as I was growing older, received a lot of encouragement and then was told writing's not a job, it's just a hobby. You can't do that for a career. So I got a degree in history because I thought if I ever do write, I'd like to write about history. And after college, I had a couple of dead-end jobs that I really hated. And I just was, taking stock of my life and saying, is this really what I want? Do I really want to spend the rest of my life doing things I don't want to do? And who says I can't be a writer? Like, why am I letting other people dictate what my life is going to look like? And so I quit those 2 dead-end jobs, which scared my new husband of 6 months. And I started a freelance writing business. And to be honest, I wasn't even sure what a freelance writer was. I knew that I could propose articles to magazines and newspapers, and I thought there might be more to it than that, but I just kind of jumped in and thought I will figure it out as I go. And here I am 29 years later, and I've published 8 books. I've been writing a blog for 6 years every week. I've published hundreds of articles, personal essays, and short stories. And so, what kept me hanging in there all this time, and what has kept so many of my writer friends who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, what keeps us going? And so I kind of wanted to look at that tonight and just kind of celebrate writers.
Absolutely. We have a great comment in the chat box from Raymond. He says, Douglas County Libraries held an event late last year celebrating Teresa Funke.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. See, when I talk about what keeps us going, that right there, that's what keeps us going. That kind of encouragement is really, really appreciated. So thank you. I know that right now it can feel really challenging to be a writer. And I know that some people have been asking me, is this a good time to even think about being a writer? I mean, there's so much about the industry that's in flux. There's, things are changing rapidly. There's new rules, there's new technologies. Um, we're not sure what's happening with some of the publishing houses, and there's layoffs. And so I'm hearing a lot of concern from new writers about, is this a good time for me to be entering writing and to be thinking about being a writer? And I will tell you right now, this is a really, really tough, challenging time that we are in, but we've been here before. And, when I started out almost 30 years ago, there were some very distinct challenges then that have gotten better since that time. There were things that we were concerned about then that are no longer relevant. And so one thing about being a writer, in terms of the writing mindset that's going to keep you hanging in there year after year, is embracing persistence. Because no matter what stage of our writing we are in, we have to remain persistent. And I know a lot of people think, oh, when I become an established writer, I'll be able to do whatever I want and I'll be able to dictate the terms. And it's not that way. Like many of my writers who've published numerous books, they still have to, propose a book, and it may or may not get accepted. They still have to get involved in the marketing, and they may or may not be excited about the direction the marketing's taking. So being persistent is something that just never goes away for writers. In the beginning, it's about the persistence of getting our first publications, whether that's in a magazine or it's your book or whatever. And then after that, it's the persistence of hanging in there through all the challenges and the changes. And you might lose your agent, you might lose your editor. And at times it feels like you're starting over. That's just part of the ride of being a professional writer. So that mindset of persistence is really important, and resilience. Most writers that have hung in there as long as I have, we're very resilient people. And that does not mean that we don't get down and that we don't cry. And I used to say that I quit this business twice a year, and I do. I'll have a little temper tantrum and I'll quit. And then the next day I'm right back at it. So I think that resilience piece is really important for writers, and we have to be strong, because it is a lot of ups and downs. And I'm not going to lie to you, the last few months, the first time I was on the Distancing Social was back in April, Laura, and all of this was really new. And I look back to that replay, and I can see even in my facial expressions and my body language that I was a little down that night, and I was a little nervous. And we were only a few weeks into the lockdown. It was a pretty scary time. So what I noticed in the beginning of the pandemic is that a lot of my professional writer friends, they either threw themselves into their writing, and they were writing like crazy for those first couple of weeks of the pandemic, or they did the opposite. They couldn't write. They were too distracted and too worried and scared. And for some of the ones that could not write in the beginning, it came back and they are writing again now. For some of the ones that, just tried to plow through and not pause to feel those emotions, but just keep going with their writing, it kind of hit them later. Maybe it hit in summer and they stalled out a little bit. So wherever you've been on this wild ride, we're right there with you. Those of us who are professional writers, we've been going up and down a lot too, and just trying to get by. I was talking to a writer a couple of weeks ago who said she has consistently written through the pandemic and through the social unrest and through the political unrest, because she said writing is the one thing that keeps me sane. So for her, she's maintained her writing routine because the writing gives her energy. So if your writing is giving you energy and you're following that energy, great. If on a different day, the energy's not there for the writing and you want to take a walk, you want to read a book, you want to just rejuvenate, that's fine too, because we have to be persistent, but we also have to take care of ourselves through this process.
Well, and I think,
So,
oh, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you there.
Go ahead.
The qualities of persistence and resilience go hand in hand. And as you said, in the best of times, writers need these qualities. But I think what you said, the ability to see it not just as this constant climb up the hill, but we can take pauses if we need to, step off the path for a moment, sit on the bench, look at the view, have a little break, and then get back on the path. That's okay. And you're not a failure as a writer if you need to do that, because you need to recharge your ability to be resilient in order to keep being persistent. I think that break, if we need it, is perfectly okay, and often results in better writing when you come back to it, because maybe you have a new perspective on what you were writing, or you took a little break and you experienced something that suddenly helps you see your story in a completely different way. And it all, to me, it's all part of the writing process. So you're not being lazy and you're not giving up. You're just taking a little break.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm,
So, I mean, if you think about when somebody goes on a hike
mm-hmm,
and we think about our goals and we set this goal and we see that goal right there and we're just going to go
right.
straight forward to that goal. We're going to go get that book published and then it's going to, get an agent, or it's going to be self-published well, and it's going to then sell a bunch of copies. And we have like this really narrow view of what this goal and this direction is. But when you think about what a hike looks like, if you could see that hike from the air, you're never going straight up that mountain. It's going around, it's going around obstacles. You're pausing for rests. You are pausing, hopefully, to enjoy how beautiful the scenery is around you, to observe, to listen, to
Mm-hmm.
feel that breeze on your face. It's like, um, it is not a straight line. And if you look at my career, you will not see a straight line. You'll see lots of twists and turns in the direction my career has gone, and doing things that I never imagined that I would do.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we absolutely, however you're getting there right now, you're doing it right, because it's not a straight line and we are going to move around a little bit. So I was talking to a writer the other day who said that, and he's written several books, but he said right now he's having trouble concentrating. And so he's just going to read a lot for the next few weeks. And he said, once I gave myself permission to just read, I'm so happy right now. I'm just reading and reading. And another friend of mine calls that feasting.
Mm,
You feast on something to get your nourishment back up. And if we're feeling down, reading a lot is a great way to feast. I have other friends that, interestingly, they're finding it hard to generate new ideas right now. And so they're resurrecting old projects and they're bringing out things that they haven't worked on in a long time and getting excited all over again about those projects. One thing I love about being a writer, and if you look back across 30 years of doing this, um, nothing's ever wasted with writers. No effort's ever wasted. No writing we do is ever wasted. And it could be that you wrote something 10 years ago and the timing just wasn't right for it. And
mm,
now all of a sudden the timing is perfect for that story. And you're digging it out of your drawer and you're saying, oh, where's that story? I know I wrote that story. And so I see a lot of writers right now resurrecting projects, which I think is really cool. And I see a lot of writers doing something totally different because, again, maybe their feelings about their current projects are a little challenged at the moment, but they're like, I'm going to try something totally different. Um, I'm going to try writing poetry, and I've never written poetry before, or I'm going to try just to see what it would look like if I tried to illustrate my own picture book. Not, and I know I wouldn't be able to sell it, but I just want to see how that changes my thinking about the story if I actually did the illustrations. And so I'm seeing a lot of my writer friends try different kinds of art to stimulate their brain in a different way. They're trying different kinds of reading. Um, and that's really exciting because it sparks a different part of our creativity and it takes the pressure off of projects that maybe we have been struggling with a little bit.
mhm.
And then I also wanted to say that, of course, in the midst of all of that, I do have several friends. I have 4 friends who in the past month alone have debuted their new books. And so books are still getting out there and debuts are still happening and book birthdays are still happening. And just about a month and a half ago, I debuted the Spanish translation of my book, V for Victory, which my children's book, V for Victory. And I was very excited about that. Now, I couldn't debut it in the way I normally would. I couldn't do a big book launch party and have a bunch of friends come out. I couldn't go do in-person events and sell books in the back of the room. But I've done several podcasts to help promote that new book. And one of the podcast hosts told me, I'm so glad you came on because nobody's ever talked about translation before.
Huh.
So I think we are finding that even though it's a very challenging time right now, get excited by seeing that there are books coming out right now and there are people moving ahead in their career, and let's support them. Let's get behind them and support them and help spread the word and buy their books and help them keep it going, because this is a difficult time to be promoting books.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's so nice to see that happening, to see books come out and get excited about it. It feels almost normal. And that's always a good thing, So
Yes.
if you really say you're an aspiring author, or pre-published author, and you dream of really, selling your work and starting to establish a career as an author, and you really want to start setting yourself up as a professional starting now during this time, what are some things that you can be doing to start positioning yourself in that way?
Yeah. Well, I know people on the Zoom call tonight may have already seen the product we have, the 10 things all successful writers do. And so I thought it might be kind of fun tonight to sort of look at a few of those things and then look at how they've changed in the last few months, and just ask you, my first tip in that webinar is still one of the most important tips, which is if you're going to be a professional writer and you're hoping to hang in there, you have to read, and read a lot. And in that product, I talk about reading in your genre is really important, reading your competition, reading current books so that you know what's out there and what people are writing. Reading your competition with no fear, by the way, of accidentally copying something or plagiarizing something. And so the question I kind of wanted to ask, and you can just put this in the chat box if you want to, is during the last 6 months, 7 months of the pandemic, the COVID time that we're in, do you find yourself reading more or reading less? Because I know a lot of people right now are having time challenges with finding time to read. Maybe they are helping homeschool their kids. Maybe they have brought a parent into their home to keep them safe. And so a lot of people are struggling to find time to read, but I'm also hearing that a lot of writers are reading a lot more and giving them permission to read more than they did before the pandemic. So I'm looking at the chat box, and what I'm seeing is a lot of I'm reading more.
Great.
Especially their genres. And one person says they're reading more because they're working from home, which is great. That's one of maybe the benefits of working from home now, is that opportunity to read. So yeah, so keep those answers coming. But I want to talk about the twist, because the twists are kind of fun. What is the twist of reading right now? So I heard a report the other day that many people are rereading old favorites and rewatching old favorite movies and TV shows. And here's the reason. The reason is because it's comforting and relaxing, because you don't have that edge of your seat stress of worrying about the characters.
Right.
And so you know what's going to happen. So you don't have to be worried about what's going to happen next. So a lot of people are rereading things for that comfort and that escapism. Interestingly, I don't typically reread anything because I always have too many books to read. And I realized I am currently right now rereading 2 books that I've read before. One is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, which a lot of the messages there feel really relevant. And the other one is an old English book written or published in 1889 called The 3 Men in a Boat. And I read this book when I was 19 years old and doing my dirt poor travels across Europe. And I remember loving this book. And I thought, why would a 19-year-old love a stodgy old English book written about three men traveling up the Thames River for a week. And so I picked it up again to see what that was like. And so I would say, yes, if you are rereading right now, maybe don't just treat it as an escape practice. Maybe look at it as, I'm going to reread with the question of, what was it about this book that I loved in the first place?
Mhm.
And what made it stick with me all these years? Why do I still remember that book? And why would I want to read it again? Maybe look at the style of the book. Was there something about the writing that appealed to you when you first read it, and why? Like I've noticed with Three Men in a Boat, I think when I was 19, I had like this fantasy that I could be that really witty writer who in just a line could encapsulate human nature. And he does that incredibly well. And I think that's the writer I really wanted to be. And so I think it's kind of fun to revisit that. So the twist on that is, if you are rereading right now, can you do that from a writer's perspective, and kind of ask yourself what, those questions about the book that drew you to it in the first place.
Yeah. I noticed in the chat box, Beth says she loves reading about. I am going to have to read that book. I haven't read it. And then who was it? Oh, Susan says, time to read the Heidi books, reread. I loved those too. I read every single one of them. And thank you for reminding me, Susan. I'm going to have to reread the Heidi books. They were great. But yeah, and it's interesting. In the links of interest I shared earlier, one of them was about how do you incorporate theme into your book and make it meaningful to you as well as your characters. And I wonder if rereading some of these books that you loved, especially when you were younger and that just went straight to your heart, might tell you a little bit about the themes that are important to you as a writer. It might kind of put you in touch in some ways with some thematic elements or style, like you said, that maybe can inspire what you're writing today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I said, I think that that's part of the fun of the rereading, is to kind of look at, where were we then? Like, where were we in our lives when we read that book the first time? And why did it have such resonance? And does it still have that resonance? Or maybe have we grown beyond
Mm-hmm.
what struck us the first time in that book? Or does it seem more relevant than ever? It's kind of a fun exercise for writers to do. Um, one of the other points that I'd made was building your writing community and how important that is. All of the writers I know, we have very strong sense of writing community. We have our friends that are our trusted writing friends. We belong to groups and masterminds, and we head up groups sometimes. And so building your writing community, I talk about in the 10 Things All Successful Writers Do, I talk about how important that is. And so my question around that is, right now when things are so upside down, how are your friends, your writing friends, connecting with each other? What does that look like right now? And how are they doing it? Learning to embrace networking is one of the keys of being a professional writer, because not everybody enjoys networking, but it's really important for getting those next steps on your career. And so kind of the twist I'm seeing on that piece of advice right now is that many of the national organizations and writing organizations that once relied on local gatherings have now opened up through virtual meetings to being able to have people from all over the world participate and attend. And so we have access to people now that we never would have had access to before. And that's kind of exciting. So networking, moving into the virtual world, we can make connections that we never would have made before, and hopefully maintain those connections and keep them going. When you go into the breakout rooms, sometimes on some of these webinars or these classes that you take, I think the breakout rooms can create a really kind of an intimate space for writers who might be sort of hesitant or quiet in person. In a breakout room, they might find that it's easier to chat with people because there's only 3 or 4 people in that breakout room, as opposed to a whole room full of people, for example. So another thing is book clubs. I think book clubs are flourishing right now. I've never belonged to a book club before, and in the last year I've joined 3. So I think book clubs are another thing that we're seeing some growth in because people want that connection. And a book club is something that you can do online. You can do that virtually. And so I think we're seeing some things shift in some really interesting ways. Yes, we miss being in person, but the virtual opportunities are opening up a whole new way to connect and network and build that writing community. That's pretty exciting, I think.
agree. And I think often people who are maybe more of an introvert, and the idea of going to a big writing conference and trying to network with strangers is very intimidating. Zoom feels often a little more one-on-one, even though you might be in a Zoom meeting with 10 other writers. It just somehow feels, I think, a little less intimidating in a lot of ways. So that's a plus. I mean, we can all get Zoom fatigue too, but I think there are definite pluses to the Zoom platform with a lot of things. And I see people in the chat box are saying it is an opportunity if you live in a small town, more remote area. It is an opportunity, a way for you to be able to connect with other writers in different parts of the country or parts of the world, which is awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think your comment, I mean, a lot of writers are introverts, a lot of writers are shy, not all of them. But for people who are shy, I mean, think about how much more willing they might be to speak up now if, for example, they don't have their camera on and they don't have to worry about that and they can answer freely. And I think for some people that's giving a new sense of freedom to their interactions. And so, I'm a social person. I would rather be in person, but I am finding that if we have a positive attitude about the virtual events, that there's a lot of good that's coming from them. And, we're seeing in the chat box that a lot of people are talking about their groups moving to virtual and continuing, which is great. I mean, I was worried that some of the groups would kind of lose momentum and lose energy with the pandemic, and we're not seeing that, which is just fantastic. So so thank you for sharing those comments.
Yeah.
The next one that we talked about was learning how to accept feedback, which typically in the product I talked about finding beta readers, joining writers groups, hiring books or editors, developing a thick skin, advocating for your own writing, and that sort of the twist I'm seeing on that right now is that some writers groups, this is so interesting to me, are finding that the virtual format is actually helping them in some really interesting ways. And one of the ways is breaking kind of bad habits or behavior things. And so to say the question on that one, the question was, how are critique groups adapting? So how are your critique groups adapting to this new world? So here's an interesting observation. It's one thing I think has helped a lot of critique groups going to Zoom or something virtual is that we're not seeing as much of that issue of people talking over each other that happens in critique groups because it's really hard to talk over someone on Zoom because you can kind of hear yourself do it, and typically someone stops and gives way to the person. And so I think we're seeing that there's a benefit to that, and maybe hopefully we will maintain that good new habit when we go into being in person, because we get really excited when we're in our writers groups and we can't wait to say something. But what happens is that you kind of unintentionally take it off on a tangent, or somebody talks over somebody else, and the conversation shifts and you're like, go back to that. So as someone just said in the chat, yeah, you can even mute people. You can mute people so that they have to take turns speaking. So I think that I'm seeing some really interesting changes in writers groups and in those kinds of communities in that way that I think might wind a good thing. For example, there's always those people in the writers group who didn't have time or were not able to print out the material before they come to the group. And now all of a sudden you're on Zoom and you get the materials up and you can see them. There's always those poor people who were coming straight from work and they had to run home and grab something to eat. So they can just run home and they're on the meeting and nobody cares if they're eating at the same time. Right. It's like, I think we're seeing some benefits that we can take back into our groups and our meetup groups and our communities when this is all over, maybe we'll have established some good new habits.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. And you don't have to worry about weather. We're moving into winter. Sometimes if a snowstorm is coming, you're like, do I really want to drive across town? No excuses now. You can show up.
That is a great point. That's a really great point. Living out where we do, especially.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah. So, um, let's see. Okay, so yes, we're that are weighing in and saying, yeah, you know, I'm meeting people now from all over the country, and we're forming groups. Think of the benefit to that if you're in your book in another country, and you start to meet some writer friend country benefit for you. So, um, you know, I think there's going to be some really interesting changes for our writing communities and how we support each other. So that's great.
Definitely. That's true. I didn't even think about that. But if you want someone to read your manuscript for accuracy for another culture, for example, and you meet a writer who lives in that country, you could trade. You could trade a read. You could, trade critiques or something. That's true. That opens up a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, just one. Yeah, we've had a couple comments. Your internet, Teresa, you're freezing just a little bit, but don't worry, we're going to have the recording on the replay and it'll be awesome. So you're good
yeah.
now.
Okay, so making time to write, the thing that professional writers do, and you know, I talk a lot in the blueprint about how professional writers have different ways of doing that, very strict schedules. Some are more of kind of an all of or nothing approach, where they maybe will take a retreat and do a lot of writing. And so I'm curious how people are finding to write, and are they finding they are writing or less now? So, you know, just let us know if you're writing less during this time, because as I said, it's a really challenging time for a lot to just find the time to write and to do your research. I mean, think of how much more challenging it is to do research now, especially for those of us like me who write historical fiction. I can't take a research trip right now. I can't go to a little tiny local museum and look up for me. And so, you know, how is that going to change?
Mhm.
So I think part of the twist on that concept, protecting your writing time and establishing a writing time, which is critical for all professional writers, is that some people are finding they have more time to write right now, and other people are finding they have less time. So some are using the time that they used to spend to work to do their writing now. Some are finding that they can write on their lunch hour. My husband now working from home, um, and he's got his meetings, you know, lined up, finding that he can adjust when his lunch hour is and can do different things on his lunch hour. So that might be freeing things up for people. Maybe they can write in the middle of the day and then before.
Mhm.
So I think that the twist on finding that time right is that in some way, having that established writing time may have remained the same for you. Ways it may have changed just because of your job or having kids at home, but the people that are really serious about their writing, they're finding a way around it. They're looking at, okay, well, where is the time that I used to spend on something else back in the time of the pandemic, and can I use that time now for my writing? So I'm curious because we've got a lot of really good ones coming in, and I haven't. What are you seeing there, Laura?
This is interesting from Catherine. She says, I'm going to Unchained Writers daily timed schedule. So Unchained Writers, they have a daily time schedule. Right now, I write on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for 1 hour timed, then more as I'm able. So even if you just set your own timer, if you tell yourself, okay, I have 30 minutes, I'm just going to write for 30 minutes, let's see what comes out, you know. And then even if you're not feeling really great about your writing that day, it's 30 minutes, just keep going. And then you, at the end of the 30 minutes, you can either give yourself permission to stop because you've done your 30 minutes, or you can keep going if you can. But I think sometimes for some people, setting a clock like that might actually help, because especially if you're feeling a little blocked, you know, you're not going to be sitting there forever. and let's just see what comes out in 30 minutes.
Yeah. I see that somebody else commented that she only does Zooms in the evening so that she can write in the afternoon. I mean, we're pretty distracted these days. I don't know about you, but I am, because and this is a good thing. It's a very good thing for writers, but so many writing organizations have kind of opened up their libraries and their archives, and they're putting all kinds of free information out there, and they're putting out really great Zoom calls and webinars, and people have started new writing series, and there's new podcasts. And I mean, it's just very exciting in terms of how much information is available to us now. And so, you know, she's saying I only do Zooms in the evening. A lot of these places provide those things in replay. If you can kind of discipline yourself to, I'm protecting my writing time. I still want to do the opportunities, and I still want to connect with writers, but this writing time is protected, and I'm going to do those things in and around it. And so, you know, I myself have discovered that for me, it's like I used to listen to podcasts when I was like, say, you know, getting ready in the morning. I'm doing it because that's when I can sort of be multitasking, as opposed to listening to a podcast in the middle of the day. No matter how relevant it is, I'm trying to that time for, you know, my work time. I think, you know, it's a really interesting thing that we're seeing now too, is that there's a lot of distractions with social media and with constant breaking news hitting our phone, and just kind of discipline to say, I'm shutting all that off, so focus and concentrate, and I can come back to it later. So,
It is really hard, because right now we often feel our social media is our connection to the outside world and to friends who we can't get together with, and family. But then and so we kind of get almost in a loop where we're just on social media all the time to keep those connections going. But then we do have to shut it off, because you're getting a lot of distractions in there as well. And having that discipline is, it's hard for me too. I mean, you know, and there are apps you can get on your phone and your computer that you can set, I'm going to do it for 15 minutes a day, and then that's it. And if you have to do that, do that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then the other thing I just want to talk about briefly was like the concept that I talk about in the blueprint about investing in yourself and treating this like a business, which is what I mean, I wouldn't be here 29 years later if I hadn't treated this like a business. And so investing in yourself. So have you adapted your writing spaces or your equipment lately? I'm really curious that, because what I've seen is that a lot of people, now they're working from home, it kind of has given them the excuse, okay, now I need a space for my work. I need a better chair for my office. I need better that I can work with. And a lot of writers too are finding that now that they can't go to coffee shops or the library the way they do, they want to make their home office more comfortable and more inviting. And what does that look like for you? So, you know, for me, one of the interesting things about that is just, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. I mean, I do have things that I have spent money on. I've got my little Microsoft ergonomic board, which you can beat up, which I absolutely love. It has saved my hands. And this ergonomic mouse, awesome. And it goes both ways. So I can sense that's really saved my hands a lot. It's been great. Those things are not that expensive. But even if your budget is an issue right now, because we are going through a really challenging time for a lot of people, it doesn't have to be expensive to take care of yourself and make your office space comfortable and take care of your body. Example, the foot rests I have, because I'm short, so I usually need a footrest. The first couple of footrests I had were boxes. And I tried different sizes of boxes and found the height that suited me best. And then I actually had my husband, who's a woodworker, make a footrest for me that was at that height. So you don't have to spend a lot of money to make your workspace comfortable, to make it inviting, to make ergonomic. It's really important, because those of us who, if this is our career, we spend a lot of time at our desk and our computers. And so we need to take care of ourselves. And so I just wanted to comment on that, because I think we're seeing some really interesting things with people getting really innovative about
Sure.
their workspaces. It's really fun.
Do you think it's important that you have a dedicated workspace as a writer that is not also the kitchen table or, you know, the TV room or something that is just your writing space? I know some writers who have actually taken the doors off a closet, and it's not a big closet, it's not a walk-in
Yeah,
closet, and they put their desk facing inside the closet and they put a nice picture on the wall so that at least that little space of the closet is their writing space and their back is to the bedroom or the den or whatever room is back
right.
there. And then, of course, you have to tell the rest of your family, please stay out of this room while I'm writing, or get noise canceling headphones. That might be
Yes,
a great investment.
exactly, exactly. That's a good investment right there.
Yeah,
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 I think when I first started writing, and I would hear that advice, and people would say things like, don't ever write in your bedroom. Your bedroom is the place where you sleep.
mhm,
And, I was a young writer. So I was like, well, you're speaking from a place of privilege to assume I have a dedicated room
sure,
I can set aside for my writing. So I think we have to work with what we've got. And if you what you have is a kitchen table. I wrote at my kitchen table for the first couple years that we were married, but like, we had, one side of the table was for my work and the other side was where we ate. It's a ridiculous little separation, but it kind of worked. And so, yeah, I think your suggestion is great. It's like people get really creative and innovative about how they set up those spaces, but that having a designated space is really important. Most of the writers I know, in fact, I would probably say all of the professional writers I know have a designated space for their writing. It's really important to be able to treat that as your workspace and have that mind shift when you come. In my case, as you can see my office behind me, which is 1980s cupboards back there, but this is my designated workspace. When I come down here, I know I'm working, and it helps make that shift in your thinking.
sure.
So yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then the last thing that I had talked about usually is the concept of always be working on your next project. And writers are always working on the next project because there's a lot of waiting in writing. We're waiting while we're waiting to hear back from our agents or our editors, or we're waiting while we're waiting for the editor we've hired to go through our books before we submit them, or we do them ourselves and self-publish them. And so, the advice is always to be working on the next thing, like always be continuing your work and keep going. And I think that's great advice. But the twist on that right now is, again, um, we're living in a really challenging time. And this month in particular, as we're heading into this big contentious election, a lot of people are finding that they are just really struggling with distractions, with concern, with less sleep or diminished energy. And so I think right now, yes, absolutely be working on your next thing, but give yourself a little freedom for what that next thing looks like. It doesn't have to be exactly the type of writing you thought you were going to write at the beginning of this year. Like I always say, you're in charge of your goals, they're not in charge of you. So whatever goal you set at the beginning of this year, it's okay if you change that goal. It's okay if you decide to work on something totally different, if you decide to try something different, or as you said earlier, if the next project is learning, if the next project is reading a great new book on writing, or attending a class or a workshop, or signing up for a newsletter, that's progress too. And that's a project you can get a different kind of energy around. And so absolutely, professional writers, we're always sort of working on the next thing, but it can really vary what that means.
Sure.
So I would just like to really encourage people, yes, keep your toe in the water of writing, but let that be fluid as to what that means to you on a given day.
Well, and I think that working on your next project can take, like you said, a lot of forms, and every little bit of experimentation you do with your writing um, is going to help you advance as a writer. So you may not have the energy to sit down and outline your next book, but you may want to play around with your voice. And so you say, I'm going to take this fairy tale and rewrite it in a completely different voice and see what happens, just for fun. So you can do that kind of thing. You can give yourself little writing exercises. You could decide, today I'm going to write a haiku. I may never write another one, but it's a great exercise. All of those things are going to feed your writing and feed your next project in ways that you might not even realize. So none of that is wasted time. None of that, it all counts as far as I'm concerned, toward moving you forward as a writer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I know some writers who are journaling now, and they haven't journaled since they were young. And I know other writers who used to journal every day, and they're not now because their journaling time shifted to something different. Their journaling time shifted to gratitude lists, or it shifted to the opposite of that, which I have done a couple of times myself, which is just sort of a list of things that you are, griping about right now. Just, get them out, put them down on the page and get that out of you. And so there's like people are doing lots of really different and interesting things to keep themselves motivated and moving forward, however that looks.
I love that, write down a list of things that you're griping about. And you froze for a second there. What do you call that list? Do you have a name for it? The stuff that you're just like,
I've heard different
right
people. I've heard different people call it different things. I called it my griping list, which was just,
griping list.
there were a couple of days when you get sort of, man, you're just overwhelmed by everything that's going on right now. And I was like, I'm just going to get it down on paper because I'm a writer and that's what we do. And I just wrote, I'm frustrated by, and then I wrote things, and then I say I'm tired of, and I wrote things, and I felt really relieved after that process, but I didn't want to hold on to that. I wanted to, but as a writer, I think I needed to put words to it. It isn't enough just to feel it. I had to have the words to go with it.
Of course. And here's a fun exercise now for you writers. So write your griping list, and then say you've got an idea for a character for a book you want to write. Pick one of the things from the griping list and then have your character write a monologue griping about that thing and see what happens. So again, you can have a lot of fun with these things, and it might give you a great story idea, or at least help you establish your character's voice a little bit better. So there you go.
I love that idea. That would be super fun to do from the perspective of different characters too.
I think it would, yeah.
How would each of my characters gripe about this particular issue, and how would they sound different when they did it? That's a great dialogue exercise as well.
Absolutely. So there you go. There you go. No gripe goes unpunished.
Right.
We just have a couple minutes left, but if you have questions for Teresa, please put them in the Q&A box so that, and again, she can talk about just about anything. In fact, I'm going to share the screen again with all of her products for us so you can see everything that she can talk about, which is really quite extensive here. Teresa, are you ready for questions, or did you have more points that you wanted to make?
Oh, no, that's great. And I did see somebody, it went by pretty quickly in the list, but somebody did make a comment about struggling to find beta readers right now that are children with the schools closed. And you can see that I have an awesome product there called Author School Visits Made Easy, which this year, of course, school visits are very disrupted. I actually heard an author speaking the other day on this topic. No, it was a marketing expert. And this person said, don't even attempt to do a school visit this year. Just put that off, make your plans for 2021, 22 school year. I have 10 school visits for this year. So I don't think that it's true that the schools are not going to be using writers this year, but I do think we need to be super flexible and available and willing to do things virtually. And it isn't so much this year about proposing something that we want to do. It's more about saying to the teachers, how can I support you? What do you need? So some of the teachers are forming little like extracurricular clubs for some of their kids around writing, and they might not even want you to come into that. Another one was doing a book club with their kids this summer. So the opportunities are still there. We just have to work a little harder to find them, and we have to be
Right.
really adaptable and think about what do the teachers need? Ask them instead of proposing your usual things. Ask them, how can I help you right now? It's really
Do you,
important.
do you find the schools still have budgets right now to pay authors to do virtual visits?
That is a really good question. And probably the answer to that, honestly, is going to be no, because the
Okay.
budgets have been cut in a lot of ways. And there's going to be a lot of rule changes once kids go back into the schools. And some of them are already doing that. That does not necessarily mean that we as authors will be allowed in. Some of the schools are saying teachers and students only, no outside people
Right.
coming in. So I think we do need to be really flexible. I don't know that there's going to be budgets for it this year. I have a particular program, so that's covered for me, but I think we do need to be really flexible in that point too, because if a teacher loved you working with you this year, next year, if the budgets come back, they're going to think of you and they're going to have respect for you.
And if you're doing a virtual visit, I mean, of course, there's still preparation involved, but you're not traveling. It's probably going to be shorter than you would in person. So it's I think still good experience for writers to be able to do that and get some sort of start polishing their skills for when in-person visits come back.
Right.
If you're okay with doing some for free. I mean, I always feel authors should get paid whenever possible, but these are difficult times for everyone.
Yeah.
We do have a self-publishing question here. When an author has books accepted by a publisher, is there a chance to have an older self-published book also be purchased by that publisher later? So in other words, if they buy your manuscript, can you then say, oh, I self-published this book 4 years ago. Would you also be interested in that?
If they have already picked up one of your books and you're working with them, you absolutely can show them a book that you self-published years before. And they may or may not be interested in it. A lot of times the answer to that is no, because once a book has been self-published, a publisher considers it to have been published. And unless you did really well with that book, or maybe something has happened where that book has now become more topical than it was at the time, but it would not be impossible at all. But I think it would be somewhat rare for your new publisher to be very interested in something that you had self-published. The exception to that would be if it was recently self-published and had done really, really well and had sold a lot of copies, then they might be interested. But what it might do is rejuvenate interest in your self-published book. So if you have a traditionally published book come out and it's being promoted in a certain way, and people are looking for what else you've written, that might drive some sales. And every time one of my books comes out, it increases sales of my previous books. So the same thing could happen with your self-published book.
Well, and that leads us beautifully to another question here. When should you get a web page? So you obviously, if you want to have your self-published book on your website when your traditionally published book comes out. So when people Google you, they will see all of your books.
Yes.
Where in the process do you recommend an author start creating that web page?
Well, if you are intending to self-publish, then I would get that web page up well in advance of when the book goes out into the world. Now, let's say you've written a nonfiction book. There's plenty of material you can put on that web page. Maybe you want to even start a blog or something to build an audience before your nonfiction book comes out. So your web page you'd want to have up 6 months in advance so that you could be sharing that information, maybe starting some really cool social media, building an audience before the book comes out. If you're doing something like historical fiction or something else for children, there's lots of materials and information you can put on your webpage even before the book comes out. And a lot of authors put really cool coming soon, pages on their webpage to get people excited and to solicit readers. Anybody want to read early? Anybody want to do a review of my book? And so I think having a web page in advance of the publication of your book is really important. And that would go for traditionally published authors as well.
Great. Do you have any suggestions on hiring an expert reader when you are writing outside your experience?
That's something that I think is really interesting that has really sprung up in the last few years is that I write a multicultural series for children. And so I've always used readers from the cultures that I'm writing about to, check my writing. That was always a really important part of my process. Interestingly, we didn't have the term sensitivity reader when I was doing it. So I was doing it before it was kind of the thing to do. Now we're seeing lots and lots of sensitivity readers that are putting up websites and telling you exactly which areas they can specialize in. Same things with expert readers, which an expert reader might be more of an expert on a topic area or a time period than they would be about, say, a marginalized group. So I think that we're finding a lot more people who are book coaches also offering that, people who are book editors also offering it. A lot of authors are offering that as a service on their website. So if you have a favorite writer who writes in a type of experience that you are not familiar with, you might want to check their website and see if they are offering that service. And then Laura, you might know of some places where people can go to just find those people as well.
Well, I know a lot of writers who have, especially with the expert reader, where they're writing on, say, a scientific topic, and they want someone to make sure their information is correct, or a particular time period, and they want to make sure they have the historical details correct. They go to universities, and most websites of universities, they have emails for the professors, and you can find the head of the history department or biology or whatever at a university, and just ask, and be prepared to offer them some compensation for their time, payment. But a lot of times academics are happy to read your work because they don't get asked to do that a whole lot, and they love to be the expert on their particular topic. Historical societies, museums, places like that are also good places to look for experts on a particular time period or region. As far as sensitivity readers, where you are really needing someone to read for a marginalized community, or a differently abled character, uh, start with Google, as Betsy Bird said on our Picture Book Summit last weekend. Ask the Google, and there are sites popping up with sensitivity readers. And if you go back our replays of our Kidlit distancing socials, we've had 2 sensitivity readers on in the past. You can go look at the replays of those, and we have links to their websites on right below the replay, so you can find that. Places like We Need Diverse Books is a good place to ask too. They might have resources for that kind of thing as well. So, but yes, you're right, more and more places are popping up with actual lists, and it's important to have a reader who is of the minority or the marginalized community that you are writing about, so that they have that direct experience. They are going to be your best reader for that.
Yeah.
Let's see. Susan asked if you could talk about writing historical fiction, picture books in middle grade. Susan, do you have a specific question about historical fiction and historical nonfiction, or you just want Teresa to talk in general? Because we are getting into the last minutes here of our social. So Susan, if you could put in the Q&A box, please, a specific question about historical fiction. I'm sure Teresa would be happy to answer it. Dory asks, how does a new writer learn what to offer expert readers in way of compensation? Well, sensitivity readers will have right on their website what they charge. And it's usually at least a couple $100 and up, depending on the length of your manuscript. Teresa, have you ever offered to pay an expert reader on your particular, like for historical fact checking or anything like that? How?
No, it's interesting because I have not had to do that, even though I've had several people do that for me. Oftentimes they were people I knew, they were friends, they were somebody I met while doing my research who volunteered to do it for me. Other times I would reach out to, I have, for example, when I was researching War on a Sunday Morning, the historians at the Pearl Harbor Museum were a huge help. And one of them did offer to read the book for me, or I think I asked and fact checked for me. I also, when I was doing that book, I did contact a local university professor and said, would you be willing to drive me around Honolulu and just show me the neighborhoods and tell me a little bit about it? He grew up there and he was a history professor. He was happy to do that on a Saturday. Of course, I worked around his schedule, but that was fun for him. I bought him lunch, and of course I sent him free copies of the books when the book came out. But I also was happy he had a book out that I thought was fascinating. I said, I'll be happy to promote this for you on my social media. And I did. So there's a lot of different ways that you can show your appreciation.
And again, if you meet a writer on one of these online forums we've been talking about, who could maybe fact check your book, offer to trade a critique for whatever they're working on. So there are a lot of ways you can barter for these services, I think. So Susan clarified, she said, what historical themes are editors looking for now? I write about local history in Connecticut. I think thematically with historical fiction, there's difference fiction, nonfiction, but with historical fiction, there are any number of themes you can put into your book because you're telling a story. And so is it important that those themes resonate with modern readers in some way when you're writing historical fiction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think I think a lot of historical fiction writers are interesting because I think we come across a piece of history or a story that someone's told us or something from our personal family experience. And it's that story that captivates our imagination. It isn't so much that we're thinking about what the theme should be from the beginning. We're finding this really interesting story and we're saying, man, how can I make this relevant to today's readers? And that's when you start to kind of explore the themes. And is the theme of the book, rising as a child, proving that you can be counted on, proving that you are responsible, like that next step towards being treated like an adult? Is that kind of the theme for the book? But it typically comes from finding that great story first and connecting to the story and letting imagination step in, making sure that the research supports an entire book. Like it might be a great little tidbit from history, but once you start doing the research, you might realize, oh gosh, there isn't enough here to flesh out and make it into a whole book. And so we kind of go through some of those, tests first, and then we look at, definitely, is there a theme that makes this relevant to today? Interestingly, kids today are not that different in a lot of ways than they were at any time in history, which is that there's some common themes for children that we kind of come back to a lot as writers. And so, some of your writing may change to be more contemporary, but the themes themselves are going to be relevant. That's why a lot of kids still enjoy reading books that were written 50, 60 years ago. It's still relevant.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, and if you're writing, Susan, about something that happened in Connecticut, local history, that's fine because everything takes place somewhere. But is there a universal story you can pull out of that would be appealing to a wide audience? I think that's really, if you want a traditional publisher to pick up your work, they are really looking at how can this reach the widest possible audience? So finding those universal themes, those timeless themes that connect across time and across location, I think is really important as the underpinnings of your stories. She says, I was told by some editors and agents that I should be writing the story as nonfiction, not fiction. Yes, I have a universal story. Again, if you believe in this as a story, I think that you need to keep working on it that way if that's the way you want to tell it. That would be my advice to you. How about you, Teresa? How do you feel about that?
I think it's interesting when somebody just sort of kind of flippantly says, oh, make it nonfiction. Because, if it came to us as a story and we connect to it as a story and our heart pulls towards story, we may not have the desire to turn it into nonfiction. And if that energy is lacking, you're not going to write a good nonfiction book anyway. So I think the story stories matter, and it does not matter where a story is set. My first book, Remember Wake, was set on Wake Island, which 95% of people have never heard of. And it's still a story that people love to read. So it's not about where the story is or whether the story is too local. It's exactly what Laura was saying. Do you have a universal appeal? Can any kid reading it anywhere, your character and what your character is going through, then it's universal.
Sure, sure. And then the location and the time period adds to the setting. It might add details to the story. It might create interesting obstacles for the character that might not exist today. And all those are great. They enrich the story, but it is really that universal connection that is going to make the story sell and keep it in print for decades. So, all right, Teresa, well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I think we're all feeling much more inspired and motivated, and we have a plan.
Well, and even if you don't have a plan, just keep going. I mean, that's right now. It's like, just keep going, just keep going. You'll make it. And honest to God, if I could do it, anyone can do it. I started out not knowing at all what I was doing. I started from total scratch, and that's where most people start. And I just hung in there, and you'll do it too. And we'll get through this together.
Yes.
Which is why I was really excited to help to celebrate my anniversary with you guys, with some of my favorite people. So yeah, keep going.
Congratulations on that wonderful milestone for you. That is amazing to have been doing this for so long.
Thanks.
Since you and I are both, what, 25? So that's really so thank you again. I really appreciate you coming here, and thank you all for sticking with us tonight. And we are, I forgot to mention it's the beginning of the hour, but we'll add this in an email that we send out to everyone. I think we're taking the next 2 weeks off of the social because I think there are going to be 2 presidential debates on Thursdays. Who knows? But we will send out an email letting you know. But we will definitely be back on October 29th. Yes, October 29th. We'll definitely be here on the 29th. In the meantime, keep an eye on your emails between now and then. So yeah, that might be even more reason to have the socials then. I agree, but I don't know if I could focus. So anyway, thank you all. You all have a great night. And again, Teresa, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Good night.